and welcome back to Stitch Chemistry. In this video, we will look at 8 full skein swatches made with Bernat blanket yarn in the color Fall Leaves. I hope these swatches will help you get an idea of both what the yarn will look like in these stitches and also the approximate area you can expect from a 5.3 ounce skein so that you can plan ahead for how many skeins you will need for your project. The swatches we will look at are single crochet, moss stitch, also known as the linen stitch, half double crochet, triple crochet, also known as treble crochet, granny stripes, a granny square, and a solid granny square. I used a 5.3 ounce skein for these swatches. If you have a 10.5 ounce skein of this colorway, then the swatches would be approximately double the size of the ones that I made. All of these swatches are made with the recommended size 8mm hook. When I first started my single crochet swatch, I noticed that there was a factory knot about a third of the way through the swatch. You can see the swatch on the left has the red circle with the blue stitch marker inside it. And after that factory knot, you can see that the colorway sections changed length a bit. Before the factory knot, I was able to get 2 or 3 single crochet stitches for each section of orange yarn. And after that factory knot, I was only able to get 1. I decided that I wanted to redo this swatch. So on the right side, you can see a new swatch where there was no factory knot and the color sections remained consistent throughout the swatch. I'm not sure which of these is the standard, but I'm going to assume that it is the one on the right with the longer sections of orange, since that seems more like what the picture on the website is showing. So for the rest of the swatches, I will be using the skein of yarn that did not have the factory knot. Here is a little more information about the single crochet swatch. The foundation chain was 30 chains long, and I did add 1 additional for a turning chain. So there were 30 stitches in every row, and then also every row had a turning chain at the end. This swatch ended up being 34.5 rows, and the approximate size is 14 by 16.5 inches, or 35 by 42 centimeters. In order to make this video, I purchased a 3-pack of these yarn skeins. So I had 3 skeins to work with, and it turned out that 2 of the 3 skeins ended up having factory knots. And after the factory knots, both of those skeins had smaller sections of the orange colorway. So I ended up only using 1 skein for the majority of these swatches. I don't really feel like this yarn has a lot of stretch, but I wanted to double check to make sure that using the same skein didn't stretch out the yarn and make the sizes of the final skeins seem bigger than they actually were. So at the end, I went ahead and made another single crochet swatch that I could compare to the first. The final swatch was a comparable size. I did end up having 1 row fewer, and it was just about a centimeter wider, but this could have just been that I was using looser tension when I made this swatch, because there isn't really a huge amount of added area to the final swatch. I also think that this is a great example of how a stitch pattern might change the way that the colorway works out, or even with the same stitch pattern, you might get different colorway layouts. So the version 1 that I made had no pooling, but the second sample has noticeable color pooling. You can definitely see those kind of X shapes on the bottom half. In my experience, colorways with smaller sections of colors are more prone to pooling, and based on your hook size, tension, and starting chain length, everyone's color layout could end up different. So please keep in mind when looking through this video that the way my swatches ended up pooling might not be the same as the way yours does. This is just meant to be used as a reference and a possible way that your yarn could look after you stitch it up with these different stitches. Next, we have the moss stitch, also known as the linen stitch. For this skein swatch, I used a base chain of 30 and I added 2 for the turning chain. There are 30 stitches per row, and I used 1 turning chain at the end of each row, and then also there's additional chain because you start with the chain space in each row. This swatch ended up just a little over 43 rows, and the approximate size was 13 by 20 inches or 33 by 51 centimeters. You can again see pooling in this pattern that changes about halfway through. I don't mind if my projects pool, but I do prefer if whatever pooling pattern starts lasts throughout the full project. So it is always a good idea to use the biggest sized skein you can so that if a pool pattern starts, you can keep it up for as long as possible. I'm curious to know, what do you think? Leave a comment and let me know. Do you like when things pool? Do you prefer them to be random? Does it bother you if the pooling pattern changes throughout the project? I'm interested to see what other people feel about this. As I mentioned earlier, there was a second skein that also had a factory knot, and that was the skein that I used to make this half double crochet swatch. I marked where the skein factory knot was with a blue stitch marker, and that is circled in red to make it a little bit easier to see. You can notice before there's 1 to 2 half double crochets per orange section, and after there's only 1. To make this swatch, I used a chain of 30 stitches plus 1 stitch for a turning chain. Some people use 2 turning chains for half double crochet, but I prefer to only use 1. So each row is 30 stitches wide plus a turning chain at the end of the row. This ended up being just over 24 rows, and the approximate size is 14 by 15 inches or 36 by 38 centimeters. The double crochet swatch also had some pooling. This time it was in vertical lines up at the top of the swatch. For this swatch, I again used a chain length of 30, and I used 2 turning chains for every row on the double crochet swatch. There are 18 and a half rows, and the approximate size is 15 and a half by 17 inches or 39 by 43 centimeters. For the triple or treble crochet swatch, I again used a base chain of 30 chains, this time with 4 chains for each turn. This swatch ended up being just over 12 rows. Triple crochet is a very quick stitch, but it does leave large gaps between the stitches that some people do not care for. So when I made this swatch, I used both the classic triple crochet stitch and the linked triple crochet stitch, which does not leave any gaps between stitches. Rows 1 through 7, which are the rows below the red line, are the linked triple crochet stitch, and rows 8 through 12, the rows above the red line, are the classic triple crochet stitch. As you can see, the linked crochet stitches are less wide because there are no gaps between them, and above the line where I start the classic, where there are gaps between the stitches, the project widens out fairly significantly. Here is a closer look at the 2 styles of triple crochet stitches. Above the red line are the classic triple crochet stitches, which work up faster but leave a space between the stitches. Below the red line are the linked triple crochet stitches, which work up a bit slower but include no spaces between stitches. Here we have the Granny Stripes swatch, which has a turning chain of 3 in the initial chain 30 row and uses a turning chain of 2 in all remaining rows. This ended up having 17 and a third rows, and the approximate size is 15 and a half by 17 inches or 39 by 43 centimeters. For my granny square swatch, I did not use a chain between my clusters. This swatch ended up being just shy of 9 rows. When I took the sizing measurements, I did it only for the completed 8 rows inside the red box, and the approximate size for the completed rows are 14 by 14 inches or 36 by 36 centimeters. The final swatch is a solid granny square, which ended up being just over 8 rows. The approximate size of only the completed rows is 16 by 16 inches or 41 by 41 centimeters. Here are all 8 full skein swatches together. I have done my best to align them to show the length and width differences and how they are sized compared to each other, but there might be some small errors, so please consider this an approximate rather than an exact comparison between the swatches. All of these swatches have a base chain of 30, with the exception of the granny square and solid granny square, which work from the center out. Finally, here are all 8 swatches of a more similar size, so you can compare the details a little bit easier. I would love to hear what you think in the comment section. Did you enjoy this colorway? Is there a swatch that is your favorite? And please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching.